Recording now.
Great. Thank you, Charity. Benvenuti e buon pomeriggio a tutti i nostri amici. Welcome, good afternoon to all our friends in the US and Italy. As the president of the National Organization of Italian American Women and the daughter of Italian immigrants, it gives me great pleasure to present today's program celebrating Italian Heritage Month, featuring our guest who will be coming to us live from Italy, Rabbi Barbara Aiello. Everyone, I believe, has heard of the well-known Jewish synagogues of Rome and Venice, but few know that there is a centuries-old Jewish community in the south of Italy, which has been one of the country's best-kept secrets. Today, we will explore the fascinating history of this community and the efforts to restore its vibrancy with our guest, Rabbi Barbara. But first, a little bit about her. Rabbi Barbara Aiello was born in the United States to cryptic Jews in Pittsburg, Pennsylvania. She's a first-generation Italian-American whose origins lie in the Calabrian village of Serra Stretta, Italy, where her father worked with the Partigiani during World War II. Rabbi Aiello is a graduate of Indiana University of Pennsylvania and received her master's degree from George Washington University. She was ordained as a rabbi by the Rabbinical Seminary International in New York City. In 2004, she was named the first rabbi of Synagogue Lev Kadash, the first Reformed synagogue in Italy. And in 2005, she conducted the first Passover Seder in Palermo, Sicily, since the 1493 expulsion of the Jews from Sicily. She currently heads the Jewish Culture and currently has the Jewish Culture and Hebrew Language Institute, a body dedicated to the study of Jewish history in Calabria. In 2007, with the help of Rabbi Aiello, Calabria consecrated the opening of its first synagogue in 500 years. The Ner Talmid del Sud Synagogue in the town of Serra Stretta serves the regional Jewish community. Recently, she conducted services at the Buchenwald Concentration Camp in nearby Cosenza. And now I turn over our program to Rabbi Barbara in Serra Stretta, where it is 7 p.m. Buonasera, Rabbi.
Buonasera e buonasera a tutti, shalom, benvenuti, and welcome to everyone. It is so nice to be with you today to celebrate Italian American Heritage Month and also to share a little of my story. And we're going to take a walk together and we're going to look through our town here of Serra Stretta, which I am, if maybe you know Nicastro or Lamezia Terme, I'm about 25 kilometers up into the mountains, an absolutely beautiful spot in southern Italy, and up a town that few tourists ever see. So I hope when you're making your next trip to Italy, you will think about coming to see us in Calabria. We would love to have you. Now, my first question, of course, is, have you been to Italy? Raise your hand, nod your head. Yes, a lot of you, absolutely. And if you haven't been to Italy, there's something that we all know about Italy, and that is that Italy is shaped like a That's right, it's my boot. Yes, it is shaped like a boot. And I like to put the push pins in to give us an idea of where we are. I am in the foot of the boot, closer to the toe. And of course, we go up a little further. We have Napoli. We go up a little further. We have Rome. We have Florence, and Milan would be up here. Why all those little white dots? Why all those little white dots? Those are to represent the paesini, the little towns that are scattered throughout the Reventino here, which is the name of the Calabrian mountains. And I have visited 212 of them. And in every single one, I have found a Giudecca. I have found a zone, a neighborhood, a street, an alley, a via of where there was an organized and thriving Jewish presence prior to Inquisition times. As I said, for the most part, when we visited Italy, we have been drawn to Rome and Florence and Venice. But down here in the south of Italy, which was part of Magna Graecia, Greater Greece, there has been a Jewish presence that is quite fascinating. Italian Jewish families date back thousands of years to the time of the Maccabees, when Jews left Judea and they voluntarily came to Italy, and we became the world's very first diaspora Jews, the very first. Centuries later, at the time of the expulsion from Spain, the violent Inquisition that followed, Jews left Spain and they settled on the islands of Sicily and Sardinia, as well as, maybe some of you know, Lipari and Panarea and Stromboli, the islands of the Aeolian chain, and to the toe and the foot of the boot, and of course in Calabria on the mainland, where I'm speaking to you from right now. Why so much moving around? The Jews were running from persecution and forced conversion. Now, there is a Hebrew word for this phenomenon, and it is called anousim, A-N-U-S-I-M, anousim. And it is a Hebrew word, and it literally means the forced ones. We are b'nai anousim, and that means we are the descendants, or b'nai, the word children in Hebrew. We are the children or the descendants of those who were forced. And so it begs the question, forced how? Well, in Spain in 1492, and as Pat said, in Spain, in Palermo in 1493, during times of persecution, Jews were forced to do one of two things. They had to convert to Christianity, or they had to leave the country. Those who converted, and many of those were my own ancestors, we were called moranos, which is an insulting term concocted by Inquisition authorities from the Spanish word for pig. Others took their practices underground, and that would be like my father's family. They practiced in secret, and as a result, they were called crypto Jews. Now, many of these crypto or secret Jewish families were desperate to cling to a remnant of their Jewish traditions, but how could they do that and not be found out? How could they avoid harassment, persecution, physical danger to themselves and their families? How could they? Well, by doing what I call hiding in plain sight. So, are you ready? Come walk with me, and together we will investigate the Calabrian mountain towns, along with my little village of Serastretta, which is right outside my window, to see with our own eyes the remarkable things my Jewish ancestors did to keep their traditions alive, to demonstrate in a subtle but very definitive way that there is a Jewish presence here. So let's go. And Charity, let's look at photo 1. And we're waiting for photo 1 to come. There it is. There. No, let me answer that question for you. No, that is not my Vespa. Many times when I do a lecture, they say, Rabbi, you don't have the helmet on your head. No, this was a photo op. This Vespa belongs to Pietro, who happens to be in his 80s. And he said, Rabbi, come sit on the Vespa. And I did. So we will begin. And that behind me is a beautiful view of the Reventino from the piazza of Serastretta. But we're going to begin 23 kilometers down the mountain in the village of Nicastro. And if some of you have ancestors or relatives that came from Calabria, and you hear the word Lamezia Terme and your relative says, never heard of that, that's because Nicastro was folded into a political configuration called Lamezia Terme. It's not very old, from the 1970s. So if your family immigrated before the 70s, they know the area as Nicastro, and that's where we're going. Today, as I said, the town has a new name. It's called Lamezia Terme, and it is named for the hot springs and the therapeutic mud baths that are found there. But years ago, it was Nicastro, and the old city center was indeed the heartbeat of Jewish life. Let's take a look at the castle. Let's look at the castle on photo 2. Ah, there we go. See the castle at the top of the hill and all the houses hanging off the side? Those are houses that were occupied and lived in centuries ago by Jewish people. The castle is the castle of King Frederick II, and he was a benevolent monarch who appreciated the economic prosperity that the Jews of Nicastro offered the region. King Frederick ruled over southern Italy during the 1200s, and at that time, as our bubbies and zadies like to say, it was good for the Jews. And in fact, the old Jewish quarter called Timpone exists today, where an impressive plaque honors the memory of the Jews who lived there. And let's look at that plaque on photo 3. There it is. And this was placed by my husband and several others who worked in the area, who felt that the fact that Jews were treated well, lived there in peace for such a long time, was really important to acknowledge. The plaque reads, in this quarter, there worked an industrious group of Jews in questo quartiere. Operato una industriosa comunità ebraica, and the archway, which is an architectural staple that indicated a Jewish quarter, led to the synagogue, and that centuries later was confiscated by the local church and Inquisition authorities to become a Catholic church. But let's take a look at photo 4, because we'll see a remnant of Jewish life. That's good. I wonder if we can make that a little bigger, but if not, that's all right. That is a church, and during Inquisition times, and that is located in Nicastro and Timpone. And during Inquisition times, when synagogues were closed and transformed into churches, it was customary to allow a remnant of Jewish tradition to remain. Now, why would that be? Well, most likely superstition or fear, knowing that the synagogue had been taken, leaving a bit of Judaism behind might absolve them from their feelings of guilt. Now, can you see what was left? It is the remnant of what we called the Magen David, or the Star of David, the original synagogue of Nicastro. Do you see that? 3 of the points were cut off. And so the remnant of Judaism is there even today. I walk through that quarter often, and everyone who lives there knows that there is a rich Jewish heritage. And I like to maintain that Jewish presence whenever I can. But sadly, the Jews were driven out. And the reason is the long arm of the Inquisition reached from Spain to Portugal to Sicily and to the Italian mainland, as I mentioned, and to Timpone, the area we just discovered. Thank you. And we'll take that photo down. No more photo. Let's bring me back. Yeah, well, thank you. There we go. Thank you, because I want to show you something else. What was it really like? We're going to step back in time and look at the situation from a personal point of view. Why? Because there were Christians who defied the directives from the Inquisition authorities. They were women who sympathized with their friends, but more than just words, these Christian women took an action. And this is how it happened. Katerina, are you there? It's so dark. And I'm afraid. And do you know? That's how it happened. Late, when the town was asleep, I went out of my door to find Katerina, my friend, my Christian friend, and grazie a Dio, Baruch Di, finally, I have found her. Why am I sneaking out in the dark to find the door? To find the door to Katerina's house? The door to the home of a Christian woman? I'm doing this because she is my friend. Directives, laws against the Jews, tui. That's what Katerina said. And she says to me that no one can demand that I disrespect you, and no one can forbid us to be friends. Last week, when she came to my door, Katerina found me in tears, crying bitter, bitter, bitter tears, because Pesach, Passover, La Pascua de Hebrée, is now prohibited. And I was heartbroken. We cannot make the Seder. We cannot eat the paniadzimo, the unleavened bread. And if the Inquisition authorities find us making the blessings, you know what they're going to do? They're going to kill us. Pesach comes in 1 week. They will be snooping around, I guarantee you that, checking to see if we are cleaning the house, checking to see if we are making the matzah. Passover, Pesach is no more. Katerina, my friend Katerina, she wraps her arms around me and she dries my tears, and in a whisper she says, you and your family, you will make Pesach. No, I said, no, it's forbidden. How? Shh, Katerina whispers, you will come to my house, to the attic room. You will come tomorrow and you will make it kosher clean. Then in the night, we will hoist the table up the ladder. You will come each night to make your preparations, and no one will suspect you of Judaizing, because you will have your Seder of Pesach in my house. You will have it in a Christian house. We will fool them all. Well, you know what? My Katerina, my friend Katerina, she was true to her word. For 2 weeks, late at night, we prepared for the Jewish festival. We cooked and we cleaned and we did it together. And when Pesach came, we made the Seder, not on the first night. No. Not on the second night. No. But on the 5th night, on a night when the soldiers would not be looking for a secret festival of the Jews. So dangerous, so perilous. What my Christian friend did for us, her Jewish neighbors. If we were found out, not only would the Jews be arrested, tortured, and killed, but to make an example to the whole town, Katerina and all of her family, they would have suffered the very same fate. As the bad years, the years of the Inquisition continued, Katerina and her Christian neighbors continued to offer their home to us Jews. We called it the Seder Hamishi, the Seder of the 5th night, the Seder made possible by friends like Katerina who defied the Inquisition, friends who helped the Jews. Friends who helped the Jews. And do you know that that is a true story? It is a true story. And this Passover Seder and the traditions continued because of the strength and the courage of Christian women. Maybe some of your ancestors helped us. I bet they did. So what happened next? Well, the Jews traveled north. They had to find safety and security in the mountains because, as you heard from Katerina's Jewish friend, the Inquisition was closing in. So they looked for an isolated area where they could create a hidden Jewish community. First in the town of Scigliano, and then the village of my ancestors, the village here of Serastreta. What evidence of a hidden Jewish presence do we find? Well, we begin in the most unlikely of places, the parish church. And let's look at the front door, and that would be photo 5. Yes, take a look. Before we go into the church, we must open the door. And there are massive metal doors that lead into, let's go back. Yes, let's keep looking at that. Thank you. That lead in to the sanctuary. No, we're going to stay there. Yes. I'll just tell you when to move it because I want to take a look at that, what that woman is doing. The panels on the doors, like the one you're looking at right now, are huge and stately, and they are intricate as well. And they depict what? Not Christian scenes, but scenes that show the life of the village. Here we see a panel that highlights the making of chairs, a craft still practiced today, and other panels show a weeping family about to immigrate to parts unknown, while other panels feature folk dancing and the Jewish women who were weavers creating cloth from the Genestra plant, all created by local artists who featured not religious scenes, but crafts that Jews who settled the town brought with them all the way from Spain. And now let's go inside. Let's take a look at photo 6. I know many of you are familiar with Catholic churches, with icons and statues, mosaics. And what we're looking at right there is Moses with the 10 Commandments. Where is it? When you go into our Catholic church and you go into the main aisle, right in the center and look up, well, right in the center, we expect to see a Christian depiction, maybe Jesus or Mary or the saints, but no, directly above the heads of the faithful is Moses and the 10 Commandments, and surrounding him are mosaics and drawings of the prophets. These were done by Calabrian artists whose families were once created, were once Jewish, and created these frescoes as a way to say the Jewish traditions are not lost. Later on, when these Jewish families felt more secure, they decorated the cortile, or the courtyard in front of their homes with, let's take a look at photo 7. What did they look at that. Do you see my cats? There they are. I have 9 of them. There they are. And I've lived here in the village now for 15 years, and hardly a month goes by without a local approaching me. Rabina, they say, come look, we are working at restoring an abandoned house. Come look at what we found. And yes, workers have uncovered yet another Star of David. It's often hidden under ceramic tile, wooden boards, as this one was, or even astroturf. Strong evidence that Sarastretus' Jewish presence was everywhere. Thank you. As was the case in dozens of villages throughout these mountains, the Inquisition authorities were relentless. They pursued the Jews, and they eventually found us, taking our synagogues and transforming them into churches. The synagogue here in Sarastreta suffered the same fate, and we'll take a look at the ruins on photo 8. There we go. Yes, this is just around the corner from the synagogue and my home. We are looking at the 2 remaining walls of what was our original synagogue, active 500 years ago. The structure crumbled during the earthquake of 1908, but these 2 walls remain. And thanks to our mayor, the town is working to gather funds to restore the building as an interfaith cultural center that will feature the history of Calabrian Jewish life. So we are very, very pleased about that. And now photo 9. Oh, that's very nice. See a nice close-up. That's me. I was fortunate. I grew up in America, the first person in my family born in the United States. My family settled in Pittsburg, and as a youngster, people would ask me my name, and I would say Barbara Aiello. And then if religion came up and I told them about my background and the synagogue that my father sometimes took me to and the things we did at home, some people would look at me in disbelief, and they would say something that I have heard all my life. But you can't be Jewish. You're Italian. And later on, when I became a Jewish professional and later on a rabbi, the same thing continued to happen. And it always went something like this. Aiello. Let's see, let's bring me back here so you can see me a little better. Thank you. It always went something like this. Aiello. That's an Italian name. Yes, it is. Oh, so I get it. That's your married name. No, that's my own name. That's the name that I was born with. Oh, now I understand. You're a convert. You converted to Judaism. Well, actually, no, I was born Jewish. Oh, I see. So your parents, they had a mixed marriage. Your father was the Italian, but your mother was Jewish. Oh, well, no. Both my parents were Jewish. Okay. So what was your mother's name? Elena Siciliano. But that's Italian. Yes, my mother was from Sicily and my father from Calabria, and their surnames were Siciliano and Aiello. But those are Italian names. How can you be Jewish? Oy vey. Well, I'll tell you how I can be Jewish and maybe how some of you have Jewish roots as well, or people that you know. Let's look at photo 10, a list of surnames. Photo 10. There we go. Spagnolo, Vita, Buonanno, Sacco and Zacco, Catalano, Romano, Defazio and Defazio, Sacerdoti, Ferrari, Ferro and Ferranti. And finally, the last one is Aiutami Cristo. These are surnames that have a rich Jewish history. And if you would like to know the Jewish background or the Jewish heritage of one of the names on this list, could you raise your hand or write in the chat and I will tell you. Anyone like to know the history of one of these names? These are all Jewish surnames. Might be surprising to you. Do we have anyone who'd like to pick out one? Charity, do you have one for me?
Yes. Okay. I'm reading the chat now.
Okay.
Let's see. Mary Rose would like to know about Romano.
You'd like to know about Romano. Romano is a very interesting Jewish name because some of the first Jews brought to Sicily were Roman slaves, and that was before the 1st century AD. And then when slavery was abolished and these same people became what we would call indentured servants, in order for them to participate in local government, they had to have a surname. Many Jewish people did not. They had a first name and then the word Ben, son of, and then their father's name. So for example, my father's Hebrew name was Abraham, Ben, son of Pinchas, my grandfather. And so they needed a surname. And in order to participate in government, which many of them wanted to do, they chose the name Romano because they were brought to the area by Roman soldiers. Does somebody else have a name they'd like to know about?
Yes, Robin would like to know about Vita.
Vita. Oh, this is a very interesting name. Vita, Vitali, Di Vito. It all comes from the Hebrew word lachaim. And many Jews, when they were forced into into Christian adult Christian baptism, wanted to signal to other Jewish people that they were indeed Jewish. And why would they want to do that? Well, they wanted to hide in plain sight, but to acknowledge their Jewishness primarily for marriage purposes. So the name L'chaim was translated into the Italian as Vita. If you know anyone with the surnames Romano or Vita, they have Jewish heritage back 5 centuries maybe, but that name is a translation of the toast, of the brindisi, L'chaim. Have another one?
We've got a few that are interested in, and I'm going to butcher this, Autumn Cristo.
Aiutami Cristo. Okay, I'm going to hang on to that one for a moment. Do we have any others before I get to that one?
Spagnolo.
Spagnolo. Oh, okay. Spagnolo is, of course, from the Jews of Spain. The word Spagnolo is an Italian word, a translation from the Spanish language, or even the Ladino, Ladino, which I'll tell you about in a little later. But Spagnolo was the translation of Spanish person into Italian. And so the Jews of Spain, who were running from persecution through Spain, Portugal, Sicily, and eventually to Calabria, to the mainland, took on that surname because that's what they were called by the locals.
Oh.
Does someone else have one?
Hamaza. M-A-Z-A.
Oh, matzah.
We've got Ferrari.
There are Jews, there are Mazas in New Jersey who are all Jewish.
And that's because
My
we
mother's
know
name.
unleavened bread is called matzah. And of course, in Hebrew, when we spell matzah in transliteration from the Hebrew characters, we write M-A-T-Z-A-H, but in Italy they wrote M-A-Z-Z-A. I have matzah in my family line as well. And my grandmother used to make matzah in an outdoor ceramic oven with a big paddle, just to make it for the whole village, for the people here who were Jewish. I'll take one more and then we'll do Aiutami Cristo. Who's got one more?
Ferrari from Lisa.
Lisa, what do you have?
Ferrari.
Oh, this is a really important name because I think that if you've been to Italy, there was no way you could miss seeing at least one absolutely ornate, beautiful balcony made of wrought iron. And that was the craft that the artigianato that the Spanish Jewish men brought to southern Italy. And the word ferro is metal, and the decorative wrought iron works were done by people who were called the Ferraro, Ferrari, Ferro, or Ferranti. And if you know anyone with that name, they have a rich heritage of being incredibly beautiful and intricate makers of balconies, so much so that here in Calabria, they are preserved historical sites, and you cannot take down one of these ancient balconies without permission from the town. Okay, Aiutami Cristo. This is a very interesting name. The girl who I first met who had this name, and you can bring me back up here and I'll talk to you here now. The girl who brought me this surname was named Patrizia Aiutami Cristo. And she came to me and she said, Rabbi, I've always felt Jewish. Some of our family traditions were different from our neighbors. When I was a really little girl, my great-grandmother lived with us, and she said that we were Jews from Spain. And I've always felt an affinity to the Jewish people, and I've gone and talked to rabbis, and everything's okay until they ask me my name. And when I say my name is Patrizia Aiutami Cristo, they say, how could you be Jewish? Because Aiutami Cristo means help me Christ. Well, I said, Patrizia, that's exactly why you are Jewish, because during the Inquisition, when the persecutions were raging, Jews who converted to Christianity who accepted adult Christian baptism wanted to give themselves a surname that would keep the Inquisition at arm's length. In other words, they wanted to appear more Catholic than the Pope. So they gave themselves names like Spirito Santo, Di Santos, Santo, Cristiano, and Aiutami Cristo, so that they would appear very, very devout. So I said, Patrizia, welcome home. And she's a member of our congregation now. And the list that we just looked at is very important because it represents only a tiny portion of the Italian surnames that have strong Jewish roots. And if you are interested, my website, rabbibarbara.com, if you click on Italian Jewish roots, you'll see dozens and dozens of those names. Actually, there are hundreds more, and these are names of Italians who had no knowledge of their Jewish history, but were drawn to Jewish tradition, and many of whom married Jews. Interestingly, of all the possible interfaith combinations in marriage, it is the most common, an Italian Catholic marrying a Jewish person. An Italian man married to a Jewish woman might say, sure, I'm Italian, but I've always felt Jewish. And the Jewish wife might say, my Italian husband, he's more Jewish than my bubby. Coincidence? I don't think so. So if those are Jewish names, they're ancient Calabrian and Sicilian names, the question we ask now is, what happened to all of these Jews? How come there are no synagogues, no Talmud Torah schools, no JCCs, no federations in Palermo or Messina, Catanzaro or Cosenza? And how come so few Italian Americans know that centuries ago, their families were once Jewish? Well, for thousands of years, Jews practiced in secret. Who were these Jews and what did they do to keep the flame of Judaism burning in their souls? Well, my father of blessed memory was one of those. He was taught by his mother that the family had been secret Jews for centuries. And when she came to the United States in 1954, and my father brought her to the US, she brought, I'm going to take this menorah down and put this menorah up and hold it for you. She brought her Shabbat Candelabra with her. Well, if you are Jewish from an Ashkenazi background, your immediate thought is, what? How can this be a Shabbat Candelabra? We light 2 candles for Shabbat on Friday night. This is 3. Can't be. Well, this is an ancient Sephardic, but actually Italkite tradition, because the candelabra, and maybe you have one of these in your house, or your grandparents or great-grandparents had one, and that is because on Friday nights often, and sometimes on Saturdays, because the traditions kind of morphed over the centuries, 3 candles were placed in this candelabra. And the middle candle was used as a shamus candle, which is what we have on a Hanukkah menorah as well, to light the other 2. And so this is a tradition that got lost along the way, but was very, very much a part of Italian Jewish traditions. Well, when my grandmother was in Italy, her name was Felicia Scalise, she took this candelabra and her Shabbat candles, her challah and her wine, put them all in a basket, and went downstairs to the basement or the cantina of her house, which is across the street from me right now. And when she came to America, she did the very same thing. She took everything and she went down to the basement. Her very first Friday night in Pittsburgh, she did that, gathered her Shabbat items and headed downstairs, except my father stopped her at the cellar door. And he said, Mama, this is America. This is the land of the free, the home of the brave. You can make Shabbat in the dining room. And she said, non sono sicura. I'm not so sure. You never know. And so, over the years, she continued to make Shabbat in the basement of her house on Methil Street in Beachview, right outside of Pittsburgh. And that story is really indicative of how Jewish practices survived. Jewish Italians had something so simple and something that served them so well. Of course, we call it testadura, stubbornness, fortitude. It also has come to mean good common sense. In other words, if they, our persecutors, want to believe that they pressured us into conversion, good, let them think that. We know better. You take away our synagogue, we take the candles, the wine, and the bread into our homes. You tell us we can't be Jewish in the dining room, that's okay, we'll take the candles to the basement. We can't have Rosh Hashanah for our Jewish New Year, that's okay. We'll make a sound, we'll blow a horn on December 31st. In my book, I write about this hidden Jewish phenomenon, the story of the midnight chauffeur. My book is called The Cat That Ate the Cannoli, and it's a group of essays about some of the things that I found here. And let's take a look. This is, if you have an Ashkenazi background, you recognize this as a shofar, as the ram's horn that is sounded on the Jewish New Year, right? But if you are Sephardic and if you are from southern Italy, this is the kind of shofar that you would be sounding. And let's look at the animal it comes from. Photo 12, the stembecco. The stembecco is a kosher animal that is native to southern Italy, Morocco, southern Spain. Photo 12. He must be out grazing. Do we have photo 12?
Can you see it?
No.
Says I'm sharing my screen. How about now?
No.
All right, let me stop sharing and start again.
You can take a better, while we're doing that, take a better look at this. This is a large horn, isn't it? And this is from the stembecco. Maybe you've heard it. Sometimes in America, it's called ibex. The animal is sometimes called an ibex as well. And this we hear in the mountains.
Are you able to see my screen now?
No, that's all right. Why don't you go back to me? And when we get to photo 13, we'll see what we can do here. Okay. So on December 31st, which is secular New Year's Eve, right at midnight, if we are very, very quiet, we can hear this sound of the shofar in the mountain communities. And so I've over the years, my 15 years here, I try to go outside right at midnight, and I can hear just what you hear at Rosh Hashanah. A tekiah gadolah, a big sound, the big sound of attention. And of course, it was dangerous to sound a shofar in September and who knew when that Rosh Hashanah really was, because a Hebrew calendar and knowledge of a Hebrew calendar was also destroyed during the time of the Inquisition. But we know that a new year begins on the 31st, and we can hear the sound of the shofar throughout the mountains. And the midnight shofar is a really good example of how our traditions survive. When it was too dangerous to be openly Jewish, we attached Jewish traditions to existing Christian or secular holidays, once again, hiding in plain sight. So what about Passover? We talked about that and about that wonderful woman named Katerina, the Christian woman who opened her home to the Jewish woman for the Seder. Well, we can't call it Pesach because that's a Hebrew word. So we'll say Pascha, and we'll eat paniazimo, unleavened bread. And when you ask us why, we will say per la Pasqua dei Ebrei, for the Easter of the Jews. But we will indeed celebrate the Seder Hamashi that we talked about earlier. And I want to show you a photo 13, if we can get it back up there, of Seder Hamashi, which we do every year. Hamashi is a Hebrew word that means 5, and Hamisha means friendly. So on an off night, smart Christian lady, that Katerina, right? She said, do it on an off night. Nobody will be snooping around. Well, we're having trouble with our photos. I can see. We're not seeing anything.
I'm sorry, it's showing it's sharing on my side. I don't know why nothing's popping up for you guys. Let me try one more.
We'll try one more time and then we'll just keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, see if you can get one more time. I'd love to show you the Seder Hamashi.
Charity, it says host disabled screen sharing, so maybe you have to re-enable screen sharing.
Very smart. Oh, there we go. Here is Seder Hamashi. Wonderful. It's the 5th night Seder and is held, as I said earlier, on the off night. And during the time of the Inquisition, brave Christian families offered a room in their home, as I said, so that their Jewish neighbors could have Pesach far from the suspicious eyes of the Inquisition authorities. And it was a way of trapping crypto Jews who were observing Passover. So as I said, great peril to themselves and others, Christians made it possible for their Jewish neighbors to observe. And we have revised the Hamashi Seder as a tribute to the descendants of Christian families whose courage allowed our traditions to survive. And that is Joe. We're doing the hand washing, and Francesco, a little to my right, and Christina, who is behind Joe, and they are an interfaith family. She is Italian Catholic. He is Jewish, but her family. Her family were Christians in this area, and with very friendly relationships with the Jews. And speaking of traditions, let's look at number 14. Here is another Southern Italian tradition for you to take a look at. Alessandro is the first bar mitzvah in our synagogue, and he is holding a plate of matzah above his mother Angela's head. And this is an Italian Jewish or Sephardic tradition symbolizing the heavy burdens that Jews had to bear when we were slaves in Egypt. Thank you. Thank you. And you can bring me back. And we'll talk about some of these traditions. Maybe you recognize them. We'll put a red string over our baby's cribs, but we won't say that's a Jewish tradition from the Kabbalah. That's just too dangerous to acknowledge. Instead, we'll say it's to keep away, right, the evil eye. When we break an egg into the bowl and we see a blood spot, we'll make sure to take it out, not just because it's a kosher tradition. We don't want to acknowledge that. We'll just say it's not healthy. And we won't eat dairy and meat in the same meal because famale, it's not good for the digestion, although it's truly a kosher tradition as well. And when the dinner is over, we'll sweep the floor to the center of the room, never toward the door. And that's out of respect for the mezuzah, the little case with the prayer that was once on the doorposts of our house. No talit, no prayer shawls. We say no problem. We will take our profession of weaving and dyeing fabric, and we will secretly make our own religious garments. And let's look at photo 15. There we are. Yes. This is weaver Marissa Leone on the right, and that's me on the left before my hair got gray. And she has been weaving shawls from Ginestra, which we call broom in English, and she's been doing this for years. She's been carrying on the tradition of her great-grandmothers. Marissa discovered her Jewish roots and is proud to tell visitors that no matter what she weaves, there is always a thread of blue visible in every piece. We put in the blue thread, Marissa says, because it is so in the Bible. And if you are familiar with the directions for making a prayer shawl, a talit, which we find in the Torah in the first 5 books of Moses, or what Christians would call the part of the Old Testament, we are directed to place a thread of blue in every weaving that we make. And to this day, that is what Marissa is doing. And she is wearing a talit for the very first time, and she was quite overwhelmed. You can see some of the Hebrew letters on the neck piece, and I am wearing a talit that she made for me. Isn't that beautiful? Thank you. When I asked Marissa why her shawls were not called sciarpe, I said, why? They're called sciarpe in Italian. That's the typical Italian name for a scarf or a shawl. Marissa said, no, these are very special. They are called vancale. Vancale is a dialect word from the town of Tiriolo. It means the embrace of God. And so it goes over the decades, centuries, really, when we took our Jewish traditions into our homes and our hearts, and slowly, first for safety reasons and then for cultural reasons, the religious meanings of these rituals were lost. Our Jewish customs remained, but they became family traditions and nothing more. And that's where my work comes in. It started with something like this. Let's take a look at number 16. I want to point out Calabria to you so you have a visual representation. It is about the geographical size of the US state of Virginia. And in the blue area prior to the Inquisition, historians believe that 50% of the population was once Jewish. And it's been my mission and my personal journey to uncover these traditions and return them to their rightful place in Italian Jewish history. And that's why I came home to Calabria and I came home to my roots. Specifically, I settled here in my ancestral home in the village of Serastreta, and I began by founding Synagogue near Tamid del Sud, which is the eternal light of the South. And the first venue was in my great-grandparents' house. Let's look at number 17. Here's our very first synagogue, and there is a remnant of the Aron Kodesh of the Ark right there. Locals tell me that 5 Jewish families organized this village, and they were running from persecution. These families were called Bruni, Scalise, Aiello, Gallo, and Di Fazio, and they hope to continue a peaceful Jewish life in an isolated forest, which is 3,500 feet above Nicastro. But we were not the only isolated outpost of Jewish heritage. Let's look at photo 18. This is the village of Akaria, right nearby. It was originally named Zachariah from the prophet, Zachariah from the prophet Zachariah. Let's look at photo 19. Here's another one. This is all that's left of the once thriving Jewish settlement in Zangarona. It's an ancient street sign, and it is all that remains. Vico e Judeca, Even the language creates problems for us because J is not a consonant in Italian. And so many times the J is confused with I, and sometimes even with the ypsilon, with the Y too. Centuries ago, my own grandmother, Felicia Scalise, tried to maintain the remnant of Jewish practice that was passed on to her by her parents. And that would be photo 20. Photo 20 and my grandparents. My great-grandparent. Let me see who's there. So there they are. This is Saverio Scalise and Angela Rosa Grande. They were crypto Jews who traced their Jewish heritage back to Toledo, Spain. And it was my great-grandfather, Saverio Scalise, who led Jewish prayer. And I often thought to myself, how could he do this? How could he? All established Judaism had been wiped out centuries before. How could he possibly do this? I thought, well, maybe he knew 5 words of Hebrew and he didn't hold the book upside down, so they gave him the job. When actually, I found out that he studied in a Hasidic community outside of Montreal called Val di Davide, and he traveled there 4 times from 1881 to 1890. And that's how he brought back some Jewish traditions. Saverio taught his daughter, my grandmother, how to kill and kosher a chicken, and her mother, Angela Rosa Grande, insisted that her daughter understand and appreciate her Jewish heritage, especially since so many of the Grande family had been judged as Judaizers. You heard that word when I was talking about Katerina. They had their property and their wealth confiscated by Inquisition authorities. They escaped persecution as they took their Jewish traditions with them, and that's really how my own work began. I really became an investigatore, searching for the Jews in this area through their family stories. And I'll share a family story with you from Gianna Furci, whose ancestors made the journey that the historians describe from Sicily to Calabria and the ankle of the boot. And these are her words. I remember when I was a little girl and my great-grandmother was still alive. We lived in Nicastro. My bisnonna told me that even though our family always went to church, we only went because we had to. But when there was a wedding, we had this tradition to make a blessing sotto la coperta, under the cloth. You see, one of the women, like my great-grandmother, would spend nearly a year crocheting a beautiful bedspread, big enough for the bride and groom's new double bed. But the first time anyone saw it was on the wedding day. 4 men of the family would each take a corner and hold it up, hold the coperta up over the heads of the wedding couple. The 2 fathers would make a blessing in a secret language. Later on, when I came to the synagogue and heard Rabbi Barbara singing the blessings, I recognized some of the words: Hatan, groom; Kala, bride; and of course, chuppah, baldacchino, the sotto la coperta. The blessings I heard as a child, now I know they were in Hebrew, the language of the Jews. And let's look at photo 21. And we started a little late, so Pat, I'm going to defer to you. Shall I continue, or what would you like me to do?
I don't know how many. I know a couple people had to leave at 2, so we lost a few, but we'll have a recording. And I don't. Maybe we should see how many people have questions. If there are a number that have to leave, they want to put their questions in the chat. But Rabbi Barbara, how much longer is your formal?
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
if that's all right.
Can we go? I guess we can go forward, and if people have questions and they have to leave, they could put it in the chat now, or direct it to Charity and me in the chat, and we'll try to get them answered quickly, and maybe we can incorporate them to the end. Thank you.
Well, then you're welcome. Let's move to photo 22 then. We'll go a little faster, so I don't want to keep you. There we go. Maybe you recognize this picture. This is a passport picture. There's my grandmother at 42 years old. Can you imagine? Look at how she looks at 42. And that is my father on the left side there. That is little Antonio. And my father had a crypto-Jewish story they'd like to tell. He said, when I was a boy here in the village, the public school ended in the 3rd grade, but Mama was determined that I should continue my education. She wanted me to know Torah, so she found an older gentleman to teach me. Unfortunately, he lived far down the mountain. But that did not deter my mother. She found a farmer who routinely made the trip to market on Mondays and Thursdays. So twice a week, I sat atop artichokes, potatoes, or broccoli. Oh, how I wished for lettuce, while the farmer drove his load of produce in a horse-drawn cart to Tipone the Jewish quarter of Nicastro. He went to market. I went to study, but I never knew my teacher's name. To me, he was maestro, and that was all. I think Jews were still afraid then of being found out. He taught me the Bible, but the Jewish stories were the ones I liked best, especially the one about how Italy got its name. And it goes like this. And then my father told me a story that has been passed along among Calabrians for literally centuries. Legend has it that in 167 BCE, when the Maccabees rose up in rebellion against the evil Antiochus, there was a war and it dragged on. Jews were faced with heavy losses. That's the Hanukkah story. And they made an important decision. They formed scouting parties that sailed from Judea in search of mercenary soldiers to help their cause. And as their tiny little boats drifted farther into the sea, of course, they had no GPS, the Jews aboard viewed a beautiful mist rising above miles of pristine Calabrian coastline. And in Hebrew, these Jews exclaimed, "Ai Italia!" Ai is the Hebrew word for island. They thought the toe of the boot was an island, didn't know it was attached further north. Tal, T-A-L, is the Hebrew word for dew, and Yah, Y-A, is the contracted form of one of the names of God in Psalm 68. Italia or Italia. It means the island of God's dew. Historians today believe that what was thought to be a legend is actually true, that these Jews gave Italy its name. Isn't that a wonderful story? It's a wonderful, wonderful story. And the last photo is photo 23. It's a yod, a pointer. It's a pointer. I had a knock on my door one day, and before me stood a young man from our village. I had seen him several times. We always said hello, salve is the greeting. And I wondered, I said, Luca, why are you here? And why do you seem so nervous? And he said, I was so afraid to come to your door. I have something for my grandfather. Before he died, he asked me to open his desk drawer and to push my hand into the back of the drawer. And there I found this. It was actually one a little different from this, but looked a lot like it. There I found this, he said. And Nono said that if you ever know a rabbi, you take this to the rabbi. You are a rabbi, Luca said. What is it? And why was it so important to my grandfather? And I told him that this is called a yod, the Hebrew word for hand. You see how it's shaped like a hand, a pointer. And I said, I will show you what it means. And so together we went to the synagogue, and I took the Torah scroll from the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark, and I unrolled it and I opened it. And taking the yod in my hand, I showed Luca how the yod is used to touch each word of our sacred Torah. And tears welled up in Luca's eyes, and he smiled. And Luca, I said, your grandfather wanted you to know something very important, that your family was once Jewish. And we'll take that photo down. And I'll conclude by saying that there are so many Jews out there. There are Calabrians and Sicilians with deep Jewish roots, and many whose names are documented throughout our area here. So it has become my task through the synagogue and our cultural center to look beyond the superficial, to remember that being Jewish is less about names and noses and more about the soul of our people, a soul that includes Jews from every part of the world, and like the corners of the prayer shawl of the Talit, from the four corners of the world and everywhere in between. So the next time we meet an Italian who says, I've always been close to the Jewish people, I always felt that pull, I've always felt Jewish, you can reach out with an open hand and an open heart, and you can say, you may feel Jewish because long, long ago, your Calabrian family may have been Jewish. There are ways to explore your heritage, ways to learn more about who you are and who you were. And if you choose, there is a vibrant Italian Jewish community that is just waiting to welcome you home. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Barbara. That was beautiful, and we all appreciate it. And it's particularly meaningful as we celebrate Italian Heritage Month to look at the diversity of Italians, that there's not, everyone thinks of Italians, a Catholic country, And as you pointed out, you have Italian last name, you must be Christian or Catholic. And one of the goals that we're going to be looking over the next year, and one of the things that a lot of us learned, is that there's so much diversity, and what we have to do is it's discovery. What we're celebrating Heritage Month is also discovery, like the ancient explorers who happen to be Italian did, where we're discovering each other and inclusiveness, and we hope that this is an inspiration to people. Meanwhile, if people, I know it's a little bit late, but I also just want to say thank you, many of you, for coming, who came at my own private invitation, who are not members of our organization, or who I know through the Synagogue and other organizations. We welcomed you, and we hope that you consider joining us. Or we have membership is open. You don't have to be 100% Italian, but we can maybe trace it, or we have a group of friends of NOIAW. So Charity will put in the chat box and our link to membership, or just a link to our website in case you're interested in joining us. Always you can reach out to me for questions, but now I just want to turn it back. If anyone has a question for Rabbi Aiello, you can either use the icon, raise your hand in the box, and Charity will call on you, or you can put it in the chat and we'll try to answer it directly. But thank you much, everybody, for joining us. I know it's taking a part out of your day, but also it was hopefully to welcome Rabbi Aiello, who's now probably going on 10 o'clock in Italy.
No, 8:30. 8:30.
8:30. Okay.
Il tempo per la cena. It's
Okay.
about dinner
That's
time here in the South. We can take about maybe 3 or 4 questions. So I know if you have to go, you have an idea of when we'll wrap up. And also you can find me at rabbibarbara.com. rabbibarbara.com. My email address is there as well. So if you would like to send me a question about anything at all and I hope some of you will consider coming to visit us whenever we can all travel freely, when it's a little easier to move around. But Charity, what do you have for us? You have a question or two? We'll take a couple.
All right, so we have a lot of people just thanking you, saying this was very interesting.
I'm sorry, we're getting a feedback there. Yeah, go ahead. Again?
The better.
Oh, no.
Might be Maria's computer, Charity.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably Maria's computer. Give me just a second.
I always like to say the technology is wonderful when it works. It's we just got eliminated dial-up connection 2 years ago, if you can imagine. So it's been quite a journey here with virtual learning and virtual study. Okay.
I see we have a question from Elizabeth Kahn. She's raising her hand. If you want to ask it while we wait for Charity.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Well, actually, this is Beth. Elizabeth
Beth?
over here.
Okay.
So the question is relative to the Ferrari name, and is there any linkage to the automaker?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all part of the same, we would say soprannome or clan. Yes. And all of these people with this name have Jewish roots. And but because a Jewish established Judaism was wiped out, many people have traditions, and they come to me and speak to me about them, and they say, this is so strange. We do some things that are very different from people we know. And then also in our cultural center, we trace surnames, and we are not genealogists. We do not do bloodlines, but we trace the traveling of a surname at a time in ancient history when nobody moved unless they had to. All of your wealth was your home. And your children got married, you build onto your home, and your grandchildren grew up and got married, and you build onto that home. And you didn't leave unless you had to. So when we see a name like Ferraro starting in Spain, showing up in Lisbon, Portugal, finding it all through Palermo, seeing it show up in Pantelleria in the islands, and then on the mainland of Italy, we can be fairly certain that this. And then we look in primary sources of Inquisition records in Spain, and we see that the name shows up there. We feel fairly certain that the person holding that name today has a Jewish heritage. Hello, Elizabeth. How are you?
Charity, do you see the other two questions or do you want me to ask them?
Yes. Okay, so we got two questions here. One from Elton. How would you characterize the current relationship between the Vatican and the Jewish people and the state of Israel?
Oh, well, it's always complicated and always in flux. That I've noticed. But I do notice that why do Italians and Israelis get along so well? Well, if you've ever watched the United Nations on TV, everyone is seated in alphabetical order. And for years, for decades, the Italians and the Israelis have been sitting next to each other. And I don't discount the fact that these ambassadors over the years became very good friends. And I think that is certainly important. One of the things that I appreciate about the Vatican is now the addition of a Jewish tour of the Vatican, where you can see the catacombs where 230 Jews were hidden during World War II. The archive that is supposed to be open very soon about the Pope at the time and his relationship with Nazi Germany. Hopefully that will clarify a lot of the speculation, both positive and negative, around that time in history. But I think of one of the most significant things that have happened in recent years was Pope John Paul II, who opened the dialogue between Jews and Christians when he said that the Jews are the older brothers and sisters of the Christians, and that there was much to learn for Catholics to learn from us. Not only did he open the dialogue in Italy, but that translated throughout the world. And when my daughter, who's now 42, when she was a college student, she was part of an interfaith group of young people that John Paul II organized on his trip to the United States. One of the most interesting things I've seen was all this group of Jewish kids doing John Paul II, "We love you," after the meeting, after the meeting that they had, and so a little bit of positivity in a turbulent world. There's a new book out by one of the members of parliament who was also Italian ambassador to Fiamma Nirensen, ambassador to Israel, who wrote Jewish Lives Matter. It's taken on quite quite tremendous interest among Jews and non-Jews in Italy. So I see a lot of hopeful signs, but I will also say that anti-Semitism is rising in Europe, and we Europeans are the canaries in the coal mine. And watch what's happening to us here, because it can very easily translate across the sea. Somebody else?
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay. I many years ago met a woman at a brunch. I was invited to a brunch, and the hostess said I was active in the Italian American community. And the woman that I was chatting with indicated that her sister was in a medical school in Rome. And this, during World War II, was arrested and put it into a concentration camp in Calabria.
That's right, called Ferramonte.
Camp was in a school, and she said at night they let the women out to walk around the village. They were taken care of very well. She said the Italians were the most humane people during World War II. Is this true?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the camp is called Ferramonte. It's less than an hour away from where I'm standing, near the town of Cosenza. There were 4,000 Jews interred there, and all the Italian soldiers and the local villagers saved the lives of all 4,000 Jews. There were 4 deaths by natural causes, and those 4 people were buried in the local cemetery, and their gravestones, inscribed in Hebrew, are still there. In the camp, there was a photography club, a drama club, a Hebrew school, 3 synagogues. There were 14 weddings and 21 births. And Signor Palatucci, who was the commandant, He said, I will allow you to live as you like. Families stayed together. They had garden plots. He said, just when you want to do something, just don't tell me. And he was someone identified him as a collaborator, and he ended up in Dachau where he was murdered, and he's now a righteous among the nations at Yad Vashem. And so if you go on my website, you will see we did Rosh Hashanah at the Faramonte camp as it was done 78 years ago. And Palatucci came up with a way for the people to do tashlik because they had to walk outside at night. Like you were exact way you are describing it is exactly the way it happened. And he came up with a way to do tashlik. So if you want to watch that video, you'll see it.
Hi, thank you.
Mhm. Yes.
We had a couple more questions. One from Gilda. She said, thank you, very enlightening. And I'm probably saying this wrong, Second Vinziti in history of Jewish origin.
Sacco and Vanzetti. So,
Okay.
Sacco, yes, Vanzetti. I've never found any Jewish origin, but Sacco and Zacco comes from the Arabic word for zakat, which is translates to the Hebrew word zedakah, which is charity or making a charitable contribution. How did that name end up as an Italian name? And from central Sicily at a 360-year period where Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived together in peace. And that name got passed around. ZACCO and SACCO are the same name. It was on my list, as a matter of fact. And it comes from the Hebrew word tzedakah. Anybody else?
Wonderful. The last question from Katie is, why did the Sephardic Jewish people go to Italy compared to going to places like North America?
Why did the Sephardic people go to Italy rather than North America? Well, during the time of the Inquisition, the King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella were the rulers of what was called then the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Now, we sometimes hear the word Spanish Inquisition, and it is really, it implies some misinformation because the Inquisition began in Spain, but it continued to Portugal, to Sicily, Sardinia, the Aeolian Islands, the toe of the boot, up to Naples. Why did it stop in Naples? Because that was the end of that was the border, the end of the territory controlled by Ferdinand and Isabella. And so as the Jews were running from persecution, they were literally running within the same country. They were not crossing borders, which of course in those times were manned by soldiers. And this was all one country, starting in Spain and ending in Naples, in Napoli. And so the trip was easier. The trip was an easier trip and a less complicated trip for those days and times. Do we have one more?
okay. We have, one more from Mary Rose, and then I think Rabbi Barbara, for those who could stay, has a little surprise song that she wanted to.
Yeah, I have a little song for you. Yes, I'll take one more.
Let's take the
Mary,
question from Mary Rose.
go ahead, Mary Rose.
I think she asked, what about Barranco? I was told by my family that we were banished from Spain and would up in Cefalù, Sicily. Were we Jewish? I have always felt
Cefalù. Mm-hmm. Yes, you were. Your family was Jewish. It's Blanco. What is the word? Blanco or Bianco? Because they're both the same name.
Barranco.
Barranco.
How's it spelled?
Barranco.
Barranco. Barranco. Yes, I'm very familiar with that. There are Barrancos in Cefalù to this day who identify as Jewish. Yes, there are some names that are really easily identified. Rossi, Russo, Sacerdoti. What is Sacerdoti? You all know it. It's Cohen. It's Cohen to Ashkenazi Jews. It's Cohen. Yeah. Aiello. Aiello is one of the oldest Jewish names. It began in Judea as Elal, went to Sicily as Ayala with the Ypsilon, went from Sicily to Spain as Ayala, then to Sicily with Ilungo, or what we would say Agello, as some people mispronounce it, to eventually the mainland as Aiello. as Aiello as well. And so I'm going to sing a Ladino song for you. It is Judeo-Spanish. My parents spoke a Ladino to each other when they didn't want the kids to know what they were talking about. So my vocabulary consisted of sex and money until I started to actually study it. And this is from a psalm, and which is shared by Christians and Jews as well. And it is called Bendigamos. And it is a song that we sing at Hanukkah on the 7th night, which is called the Feast of the Daughters, a wonderful feast for the girls and the women of the house. And also we sing it at the Birkat Hamazon at the Grace After Meals. And I'll sing it for you. And you'll hear Spanish and you'll hear a little Hebrew. You'll hear Adonai ki tov, Adonai is the name of God, ki tov, very good, ki leolam hasdo. Okay. Bendigamos al Altísimo, al Señor que nos creó. Démosle agradecimiento por los bienes que nos dio. Alabados es su santo nombre, porque siempre nos ha apiado de lado naikito, ki leolam hasdo. Alabados es su santo nombre, porque siempre nos ha apiado. Odula Donai Kito Kileolam Hasdo. Thank you. It's been my honor to be in your company today. Thank you.
And thank you, Rabbi Barbara, again, and thank you, Charity, for keeping us online. And
thank you,
everybody
Pat,
who's
for
joined us.
organizing this and inviting me, and thanks to Charity too. Excuse me.
Okay. And I just, one last thing is that NOIAW last year had planned a trip to Calabria and Puglia, and then the pandemic hit. And now we know that when we do it again, we have to include a visit to Rabbi Barbara and Sarah Streta and visit a mushpaka, or a Jewish family there.
Absolutely.
Okay, well,
Absolutely.
Thank
Parenti.
you.
Thank
We
you.
have, this is recorded, so if people missed part or who registered and can be, we're going to send the recording out and you can view it again and hopefully on YouTube. But thanks again to everyone. Mille grazie. Arrivederci.